Mr. Moedas, welcome. And first question. Your goals for EU research and innovation policy are summarized as open innovation, open science, and open to the world. Which are the initiatives to achieve these goals?
So the idea that we had in 2014 was the idea that without being open, you cannot do science or innovation, and without being open to the world, even less. And so our objective to create the dynamics for the European science and innovation was call it the 3 O's, the open innovation, open science, and open to the world. And for me, that is crucial in a time where you see so many politicians in parts of the world trying to close, that science was doing exactly the reverse, because science is one of the examples in the world that there's nothing you can solve alone in one country, because science has no borders. And so I think that for us, apart from being a technical statement, because there is a technical definition of open innovation or open science, but it's also a political statement of Europe. Europe being open to the world is something that is very important for us. And so we are developing instruments in the different parts of the program to prove that these kind of vision has concrete actions. Open science, for instance, I think that we took a very important decision with all the ministers around the table that Europe will be open data and open access to publications until 2020. What does that mean? It means that the researchers will be able to read articles for free instead of paying to read in the internet articles, in scientific articles. And that's a big change of openness, is that you create a system where it's free to read in terms of articles of science, which will give the opportunity to everybody, wherever they are, to be an equal foot to discoveries and to innovation.
How do you deal with the European paradox, the difficulty of European countries to transform research results into marketable innovations?
I think that's one of the biggest really challenges that we have. And for that we developed this idea of a European Innovation Council. And that is creating a brand in Europe, a brand of openness, and a brand where you actually get the best innovators. So far we had a political and I would say policies in the area of innovation where we would be very top down. So I will tell you, why don't you innovate in batteries? Or why don't you innovate in some area of chemistry? Or why don't you get me a new material? I think that the way we have to do it is the other way around. Is I don't have to tell you what I want. You have to tell me what you can do. And that those ideas can be in the cross sections of different disciplines, because you don't know who's going to be the guy who will invent the new battery, because the new battery probably will not come from a guy that does batteries today. And so the idea of the European Innovation Council is exactly to solve that paradox, where we are extremely good at creating knowledge, and we have proven that we are by the European Research Council, where this year we had 2 Nobel Prizes that were grantees of the European Research Council, exactly because we gave them the freedom of doing what they want. And I think in innovation we also have to give that freedom to people, come to us with projects that are disruptive. And so I think that the way we want to change the policy is exactly that. Instead of being top down, instead of telling people what to do, is basically letting people tell us what they want to do. Find the best innovators and let them tell us what they want to do.
How could the interaction between research, education, innovation be strengthened? It's the knowledge triangle, you know.
Yes, I think that that is the biggest challenges of a lot of the European countries, is that you need in science and innovation to have public investment but also private investment. And what you see today in certain parts of Europe is that you have the public investment, but the private investment is not there. And so I have to create conditions for that private investment to get on board. We saw here today a very good example from Minister Fotakis about the fund of funds that you are creating in the Greek system, that you will attract private money into research and science and innovation. And so we are doing also that at European level with the fund of funds at the European level. And so I was very happy that we are aligned in that, for that matter, with the same objectives.
Does Horizon 2020 work program for next years take into account new challenges such as the immigration crisis or long-term priorities or the transition to Industry 4.0?
Yes, I mean all those Prima is a great example of taking into account migration, because I think that the food and water challenges have a lot to do with migration, and so that is really one of our priorities in our program. Industry 4.0, which is the very important point, how to link the digital world and the physical world, is also a big part of our objectives for the future, because I think that without that link of the physical and the digital world, you cannot make it. So all those aspects are embedded in the program, and will be embedded in the next years to come.
Which are the next steps towards the new EU framework program for research and innovation, FP9? Now we are in Horizon 2020, but in next years we are going to have the new program.
So the big step we just achieved was to have an independent group of thinkers that was led by Pascal Lamy, a former commissioner, but also the former director general of the WTO, that with a group of scientists, they created an independent report to tell us a little bit what the future should be. And in that report is the first step. The first step is to get independent people to tell us what they see the future will be. And I would take from that report, there's 11 recommendations, but I think that report actually told us a lot of things that we have to do in terms of the deficit or the paradox of innovation. The report tells us you should focus more on the innovator and not the innovation. And that's exactly the idea of the European Innovation Council. The report tells us that money is not everything. I mean, you can do a lot of money and put a lot of money in innovation, but if the economy is very rigid, you will not have new things happening. And the report also tells us that you have to create in the next framework program a way of getting people involved with science. People somehow in the last 20 years got disconnected from science because science got more complex. So, I mean, in the 1940s, the guys who developed the transistor, was very easy for them to explain the basics of physics and chemistry up to what developed the transistor. But today, I mean, the chain in between the fundamental science and the products is very long. People, for instance, don't know that when you do a PET scan, which is very important to detect cancer, that comes from Einstein's discovery of the idea of antimatter, you know, but that's very difficult to explain to people. So you have to create ways of getting people excited about science. And the report tells us that we should think about these ideas of missions of science, where people are proud of being European. And so why don't we create missions where people understand what we do? Instead of saying that we will develop new materials, we could say that we'll be the first to develop, I'll give you an example, the first electrical commercial plane that can go around without fuel. And if one day Europe achieves that, people will be proud because they understand what you do. And I think that understanding in between the people and us, it's very important to get people around the idea of Europe. People have to be very involved in what we do. And today, people in the street, not scientists, because scientists appreciate what we do, they don't know what's our job, what's our role, what are they getting from us. And so you have to develop this idea really of missions back into science, and we're working very much on that, and that comes from that report. So I'll say these fundamental points for the next program.
Which are the objectives of the Prima Initiative and its importance to your Mediterranean research community?
So I mean, that's the reason I'm here today, and I think that I wanted to congratulate Greece and the Minister Fotakis and the Member of Parliament Sofia Sakorafa, that were basically pillars of this initiative happening. And so I thought that coming here was also to thank the Greek people and the state of Greece for the help, because Prima is about exactly a lot of these points we're talking. Today, if you look at the water and food problem for the next 10 years, you need to solve it not country by country. Nobody can solve that. And so you have to look at the Mediterranean as a whole and try to think what can we do in terms of research that is close to the people. I said that today. I mean, this is not about creating very interesting articles in scientific journals. It's about solutions for people in terms of water and food. The case of water that I know well because I'm a civil engineer by training, it's staggering. I mean, you go 20 years ago and you see that you had 9,000 cubic meters of water per year and per person in the world, and we will get to 2050 with less than 3,000 cubic meters per year and per person, which means that we really are talking about a very scarce resource, and we have to do something about it. And I think that those are the matters. So it's a program we will have around 500 million. We have today a lot of countries that are involved, countries from the European Union, but also countries from the other side. And we're very happy with the process. So we'll have a big 10-year project on food and water, which is essential for the future of all of us. And Greece was extremely involved, and I came here to thank the minister, but also in particular Sofia Sakourafa, she was the rapporteur in the European Parliament, and she was crucial for the approval of this project. And I thought that a good way of really launching and telling people about the project was to come to Greece.
How could Europe take advantage of science diplomacy? I think that Prima is an example of science diplomacy.
Yeah, I think that Europe should really be the beacon of science diplomacy, because we have the best fundamental science of the world, and we have to use that science to create bridges. And so instead of having, I think that the views of today populists that you should kind of build walls and fences and close yourselves, Europe should be the contrary. And I think that the best tool to create those bridges in between countries is science diplomacy. You know, even in the harsh times of the Cold War, there was always links in between the scientists in the West and the East. And I think that science is really one of the most powerful tools for creating those bridges, even with countries that would not sit around the table. And I'll give you an example. I think that Prima encompasses that very well, because you have in Prima European countries, but you also have in the Mediterranean countries Israel, you have Egypt, you have Lebanon, countries that eventually would not sit down to talk about other matters, but they will sit down to talk about science. And I think that that is something that we should cherish as Europeans, that we can make it happen. I'm going next month to Jordan, where there's another project called Sesame, which is a particle accelerator in Amman, which is exactly the same example, that you have countries from both sides of the Middle East conflict sitting together around the table.
So thank you very much.